The royal grave rejected her before the court finished cheering. Liora Veyne hit the bottom of the unfinished tomb on her knees, palms scraping against cold black stone carved for a king who was not dead yet. Above her, the grave mouth yawned open beneath the dragon hall floor. A perfect circle of obsidian steps, dragon bone pillars, and gold funeral runes too new to belong to mourning. The nobles stood around its edge in ceremonial black, their faces bright with the ugly relief of people watching someone else become proof. Treason needed a body. Tonight they had chosen hers. Daughter of a traitor, someone whispered. The words traveled easily down into the tomb. Stone had always known how to carry cruelty. Liora kept her head bowed, not because she was broken, but because she had learned early that looking up gave people a target. Her father's name had been dragged through the kingdom for 12 years. Dragon Veyne, royal grave mason, accused of selling burial roots to foreign assassins and poisoning the old queen's death chamber. He had been executed before Liora was old enough to remember his voice clearly. Since then, the court had treated her like a stain that had somehow learned to sweep ash, carry water, and lower her eyes. A servant could be tolerated. A traitor's daughter could be used. Lord Chancellor Merrick Voss stood above the tomb, tall and thin, in robes lined with dragon-scale thread. His silver hair was braided back from a face too calm for an execution. "Let the grave receive the bloodline that betrayed the crown," he declared. "If she is innocent, death will know." Liora almost laughed. Death had never been allowed to know anything in this palace. Death was managed, signed, sealed, decorated. In Draven courts, even grief needed permission. The royal family did not even rot without approval. Then Dragon King Vaelor Draven stepped to the edge of the tomb. The chamber changed around him. Liora felt it before she saw him. Heat under stone, pressure in the air, the quiet terror of every noble pretending not to fear the man they served. He wore black armor shaped like folded dragon wings, his dark hair loose around a face carved too sharply for gentleness. Gold burned in his eyes, but the fire did not look whole. It looked strained, pulled thin beneath the surface. He did not look at Liora first. He looked at the grave. That frightened her more. Vaelor had ordered the tomb opened. Vaelor had allowed Merrick to drag her from the lower archive, chain her wrists, and name her father's treason before the entire fire court. He had watched as if waiting for the stone to answer a question he had not dared ask aloud. Now, standing above the tomb built for his own future death, the Dragon King looked almost wary. Merrick bowed. "Your Majesty, the grave awaits judgment." Vaelor's voice was low. "Then let it judge." "Comment, not merce." The gold runes around the tomb mouth ignited. Liora's chains tightened as the stone beneath her knees warmed. She forced herself not to cry out. Her wrists were already raw from iron. Her throat ached from refusing to beg. The court expected pleading, tears. A confession invented by fear. She would not give them music for their cruelty. A narrow seam of blue-white light opened under her left hand. The tomb breathed. Not dust, not rot. Breath. Old, cold, and aware. Liora Froze. The black stone beneath her palm softened as if listening to her pulse. Funeral runes crawled toward her fingers, then stopped. Then they turned away from her. "One be one." Liora heard the first gasp above. The tomb rejected her. A ring of funeral light rose around her knees, not closing over her, not swallowing her, but pushing outward like a barrier. The chains on her wrists fell open. The iron struck the tomb floor and cracked as if it had been dead longer than the grave itself. Merrick's voice sharpened. "Impossible." The grave answered him. The obsidian floor split around Liora, not beneath her, but toward the steps where Vaelor stood. Black stone veins raced upward through the tomb walls, across the gold funeral runes, and into the dragonbone pillars holding the chamber open. The runes changed direction. They no longer pointed toward Liora. They pointed toward the king. Vaelor did not move. For the first time, Liora looked up fully. Stone chains rose from the grave. They did not climb like vines. They unfolded like decisions made long ago. Black links, carved from the same obsidian as the tomb floor, burst through the funeral runes and snapped toward Vaelor's body. One wrapped around his wrist. another around his chest. A third coiled across his throat without choking him, measuring the place where a future prison would close. The court erupted. Protect the king. Break the spell. She cursed the grave, but Vaelor only stared down at Liora, not with gratitude, with recognition he did not want. Liora stood inside the grave that would not take her. Her knees shook, but she forced herself upright. At the edge of the tomb, guards drew blades. Merrick lifted one pale hand, stopping them before they could leap down. That was when Liora knew. He had expected danger, just not this direction. The tomb tightened around Vaelor's chest. His gold eyes flared, and for one breath, the outline of a massive dragon shadow appeared behind him. Wings spread against the vaulted ceiling. But the shadow was thin, torn. Its fire poured downward through hidden grooves in the tomb steps, disappearing into the unfinished stone beneath the court's feet. Liora saw the grooves. Her breath caught. She knew those marks. Not from court scripture. Not from royal burial law. From the old charcoal sketches her father had hidden beneath their floorboards before he was taken. Mason lines. Release seams. Warning cuts disguised as decoration. Her father had not sold the king's grave. He had refused to finish the king's cage. Vaelor followed her gaze to the grooves. The Dragon King looked at the tomb built for him, then at the council standing safely beyond its reach, then at the stone chains wrapping his living body, and he understood something terrible. Liora whispered before anyone could stop her. This grave was never waiting for me. The tomb pulsed. Merrick's calm shattered. Silence her. The guards moved. The grave moved faster. A wall of black stone rose between Liora and the blades, curved like a dragon's rib. Across its surface, words burned in ancient funeral script, bright enough for every noble to read. Death will not receive the falsely named. The court went silent. Leora's breath caught. Falsely named. Not innocent. Not free. Named wrong. The tomb did not absolve her. It demanded the correct traitor. Vaelor's stone chains tightened again, drawing a sharp sound from him before he swallowed it. The unfinished tomb was not dragging him down as punishment. It was preparing him, measuring him, fitting him. The grave does not punish guilt. It completes the contract written into it. The unfinished tomb began closing around the living Dragon King, and from somewhere beneath the sealed floor, a dead woman's voice whispered through the stone. Name the traitor before the grave finishes remembering him. The grave did not pull Vaelor down. It measured how much of him had already been buried. The black stone chains tightened around the Dragon King's wrist, chest, and throat with the patience of something that had waited longer than any living courtier. They did not yank. They did not strangle. They pressed, tested his breath, weighed the heat under his skin, and drank the thin gold fire leaking from his armor seams into the grooves of the unfinished tomb. Liora watched from behind the curved wall of black stone that had risen to shield her. Her broken chains lay at her feet. The grave had refused her, but it had not freed her. It had changed her from offering to witness, and witnesses in Draven courts rarely lived long after being recognized. Name the traitor before the grave finishes remembering him. The dead woman's voice faded into the floor. Merrick Voss recovered first. Kill her. 3 guards leapt down with blades drawn. The grave turned toward the blades. Black runes flashed across the tomb wall. The swords cracked from tip to hilt, falling apart like dead ice. The floor opened just enough to hold the guards in place. Across the ribbed wall, new words burned. The falsely named cannot be killed inside royal death. Leora's breath caught. Not protected. Reserved. There was a difference. Vaelor's voice came through clenched teeth. What does it want? Liora looked at him. The king who had stood silent while she was dragged into his grave. The living man now measured by the tomb built around his future body. It wants the correct name, she said. Merrick snapped. It wants treason blood. Hers. The tomb pulsed once. Every funeral rune turned black. Vaelor's eyes stayed on Liora. Your father built the first burial route. She went still. He knew. I needed his bloodline near the tomb, Vaelor said. The words were honest. That made them worse. Liora stepped closer to the ribbed stone wall. You needed my father's bloodline, so you fed his daughter to the grave. The chamber went silent. Vaelor did not deny it. Good. Denial would have insulted them both. His jaw tightened as the chains pressed harder against his chest. I thought the tomb would answer why my fire was being taken. And you thought my body was a suitable question. A flicker crossed his face. Not apology. Not yet. Shame before it learned how to speak. The grave answered before he could. The chain around Vaelor's wrist loosened by one link and stretched toward Liora, stopping just before the rib wall. Its black surface opened into a narrow seam of blue-white light. Adimo. The tomb needed payment to remember correctly. Her hand. His chain. A bridge between the falsely named and the body being fitted for burial. Vaelor saw her hesitation. Do not touch it if it will harm you. Liora almost laughed. Now you ask? The words struck him. He accepted them in silence. That silence did not erase anything. But it was better than command. Liora lifted her hand. The grave wall lowered just enough for her fingers to pass through. The moment her skin touched Vaelor's chain, the tomb opened inside her. Cold swallowed the chamber. She stood in a memory made of stone dust and funeral oil. Her father's hands appeared first, broad and scarred, pressing chalk lines into black marble. Arven Veyne knelt inside this same tomb years ago. Younger than she remembered him, his face hollow with fear. He was not carving a burial route. He was cutting a release seam. Liora saw him hide it beneath decorative funeral script. Saw him carve warning marks where the court would mistake them for grief designs. Saw him press his thumb into wet mortar and whisper, "If they close him alive, let death remember I refused." Her throat closed. They did not fear her father because he betrayed the grave. They feared him because he built one that could remember. The memory shifted. A queen's death chamber. Black curtains. Gold ash bowls. A sealed corpse room where no servant should have entered. Her father stood beside a burial door with blood on his sleeve, not from murder, but from holding the door shut. Someone on the other side reopened it. A staff tip pressed into the lock. Silver black. Dragon scale carved. Merrick's staff. Liora gasped. Her father had not poisoned the queen's death chamber. He had sealed a burial route someone else reopened after the mourning record was signed. After the court needed a traitor to carry the shape of the crime, the missing royal burial key had not been stolen by Arven Veyne. It had been melted, narrowed, and forged into the inner spine of Merrick's black staff. Each time he tapped that staff against the tomb floor, he was not commanding guards. He was opening old death routes. Liora tore her hand from the chain. The real chamber crashed back around her. She stumbled, but did not fall. Vaelor's chain remained stretched toward her, one link glowing faintly where she had touched it. His eyes fixed on her face, too sharp, too hungry for the truth she had paid to see. "Speak," he said. Leora's fingers curled. "You do not command a witness." The grave pulsed. Vaelor went still. Then, slowly, painfully, he lowered the command out of his voice. "What did you see?" Liora turned toward Merrick. For the first time since the tomb opened, the Chancellor looked afraid. "My father did not poison the Queen's death chamber," she said. "He sealed the route that someone else reopened." Merrick's face hardened. "A dead traitor's daughter repeats dead lies. The missing burial key was not hidden by my father." The tomb walls stirred. "It is inside your staff." Every eye turned. Merrick's hand tightened around the black staff. Too quickly. Vaelor saw. The grave saw. The staff saw itself remembered. A crack of blue-white light opened along its shaft. Merrick stepped back. The tomb floor followed him with a thin line of fire, writing as it went. Not a name yet. A title. The letters burned slowly across the obsidian between Liora and the court. The tomb did not write a murderer's name. It wrote the office that had purchased silence. Gravekeeper. The court drew back from Merrick as if the title had teeth. Vaelor's chains tightened one more time, and the tomb spoke in the dead woman's tired voice. "Name what the gravekeeper bought before you ask whom he killed." The tomb did not want Merrick's name yet. It wanted his receipt. The words did not appear on the wall. They moved through the grave like a demand older than speech. And every funeral rune in the unfinished chamber turned toward Merrick Voss's cracked staff. The silver-black wood trembled in his hand. Blue-white light leaked from the split, running along its spine, thin at first, then brighter, revealing the shape of something buried inside. Okay. Melted narrow. Forged long. Hidden where a council chamber would call it authority and a grave would remember it as theft. Merrick tightened his fingers around the staff until his knuckles whitened. Grave. Keeper is ceremonial, he said. An old burial title. Nothing more. The tomb answered by dragging the staff downward. Merrick tried to resist. The grave did not argue. It pulled the staff tip to the obsidian floor. And the moment the hidden key touched stone, blue-white fire spread in a perfect circle around him. Not binding his body. Not yet. Binding his office. Letters carved themselves into the tomb floor. One word at a time. Received. One queen's silence. Paid. One mason's bloodline. Collateral. One living king. The chamber went so still Liora heard Vaelor's chain scrape once against his armor. The tomb had not found a crime. It had found an account. One queen's silence. One mason's bloodline. One living king. She stared at the words until they blurred. Her father's execution had not been punishment. It had been payment. The court had not killed Arven Veyne because he betrayed the crown. They had spent him to purchase a cleaner death record. And after they spent him, they kept his daughter alive as remaining bloodline. Useful only if the grave ever needed to be opened, questioned, or forced to remember. Liora felt sick. Not with fear. With understanding. Vaelor's voice came low from above the tomb steps. Collateral. The word sounded different in his mouth. Less like law. More like a blade finding bone. The chains around him tightened in answer. Black stone links pressed into his armor, drawing more of his thin gold fire into the grooves beneath the tomb. He looked down at the receipt burning across the floor, then at Merrick. This grave was pledged against me. Merrick's calm returned in pieces, each piece colder than the last. Against instability. Against me. Against a kingdom that cannot survive, a dragon king consumed by grief, suspicion, and old fire. Merrick lifted his chin. Your mother died. The court shook. The border houses waited to see if a sun raised on rage would burn half his realm for answers. I bought stability. Liora turned toward him. With my father. With a traitor's line. The tomb pulsed black. The word traitor cracked across the air and fell apart before it reached the floor. Liora stepped closer to the receipt. Murder ends a life. Gravekeeping edits what the life is allowed to mean. The tomb warmed beneath her feet. Merrick looked at her for the first time as if she were not a servant, not a stain, not even a problem. As if she were a door he had failed to lock. Vaelor's eyes shifted to her. There was pain in him. And fury. But he did not command her this time. He waited. That was new. Not enough. But new. Liora looked back at the receipt. What did the queen know, she asked. That made her death need editing. The tomb did not answer with words. It opened the floor. Not beneath Liora. Not beneath Vaelor. Beneath the receipt. The carved letters sank, folding inward like a burial cloth being pulled away from a face. Cold funeral smoke rose from the opening, carrying the scent of ash roses, old gold, and something bitter Liora could not name. A death chamber formed inside the smoke. Queen Marianne Draven lay on a black stone bier beneath a canopy of mourning silk. Her hair had been braided with gold thread. Her hands rested over her chest. At first, she looked like every royal dead body Liora had ever helped prepare from a distance. Arranged, cleaned, made obedient. Then the dead queen's fingers moved. Liora stopped breathing. She was alive, someone whispered from the court above. No, Merrick said too sharply. Death echoes. The tomb exaggerates. But the memory continued. Queen Marianne's eyes opened. Not fully. Just enough for the grave to remember refusal. Her lips parted. No sound came out. A black burial cord had been sewn beneath her tongue. The court had not buried her words. It had sutured them. Liora touched her own throat. The queen had not been poisoned into silence. She had been edited after death began and before death was allowed to finish. Vaelor's chain snapped tighter across his chest. His dragon shadow burst behind him, larger this time, furious and thin, wings striking the vaulted ceiling before flickering apart. My mother spoke after the mourning record, he said. The tomb wrote one line beneath the memory. She tried. Merrick's staff cracked louder. Inside the smoke, Arven Veyne appeared beside the sealed chamber door. Leora's father looked younger, terrified, alive. He pressed both hands against the burial route, trying to keep it shut while someone outside demanded entry. The staff tip pierced the lock. The door opened. Merrick entered the Queen's chamber with 2 council lords behind him and the half-melted burial key glowing in his hand. The Queen's lips moved again. This time, the grave let sound through. Not a sentence. A breath. A name trying to survive. Merrick stepped to the bier and pressed the key against the Queen's mouth. The sound died. Liora shook with rage so deep it felt cold. "You did not buy a murder," she said. Merrick's face had turned pale. "You bought the right to edit one." The tomb pulsed approval. Vaelor's voice was nearly unrecognizable. What did she try to say? Merrick looked at him then, and for the first time, something like pity crossed his face. What every dying queen says. A warning. A fear. A mother's last madness. The tomb rejected the words. The smoke darkened. The memory rewound. Queen Marianne's mouth opened again. The black cord under her tongue burned away line by line. The grave was not kind. It was exact. It did not restore her gently. It forced the silenced moment to stand in front of every person who had benefited from its burial. Liora stepped toward the memory. The dead queen's eyes turned. Not to Vaelor. To her. The breath caught inside Leora's chest. The queen could see her. Or the grave wanted it to feel that way. The dead woman's voice whispered through the tomb. Grave witness. The word struck Liora harder than any accusation. The funeral runes around her feet rearranged themselves. Not into a crown. Not into a bloodline mark. Into an open eye carved inside a grave door. A witness mark. Vaelor saw it. So did Merrick. The Chancellor's expression sharpened with real fear. Do not let her hear the death. Name. Too late. The tomb opened the Queen's sealed mouth. The entire Dragon Hall went cold. The Queen's first word was not Merrick's name. Not treason. Not murder. It was Vaelor's true death name. Liora heard the name once and understood why Merrick had bought a queen's silence. It did not sound like a name meant for a living man. It sounded like stone being taught where to close. The moment Queen Marianne's dead mouth released it, every chain around Vaelor remembered its purpose. The black links tightened across his wrist, chest, and throat. They did not kill him yet. They measured the shape of his last breath. Vaelor dropped to one knee on the tombstep. His dragon shadow tore open behind him, vast and furious. But the wings did not fully form. Gold fire ran down the shadow's spine and vanished into the funeral grooves beneath the floor. The unfinished tomb drank it eagerly now. It had heard the name. It knew him. Merrick pointed his cracked staff toward Liora. She has heard it. She can finish him now. The chamber turned toward her. Nobles who had stepped away from Merrick now stepped away from her too. The same court that had thrown her into the tomb as disposable now looked at her as if she had become more dangerous than the grave itself. A grave witness was useful only until she heard something death wanted. Vaelor lifted his head toward her. Pain had stripped command from his face. What did my mother call me? The tomb waited. Merrick waited. Liora swallowed the name back. Not what you think, she said. Not a name for a son. A name for a burial already purchased. The receipt on the floor burned brighter. Collateral. One living king. The word collateral split open, revealing older script beneath it. Reserved body. Vaelor Draven. Status. Breathing. Condition. Dragonfire remaining. The court recoiled. Liora looked at Merrick. His death name was written into the grave before he became king. Merrick's face hardened. Every royal tomb requires preparation. This was not preparation. The grave warmed beneath her witness mark. It was a claim. The tomb opened another memory. A drafting room beneath the old funeral wing. Long tables, black ink, gold ash. Councilmen signing in silence, while a younger Merrick stood over a stone ledger. At the center lay a strip of burial cloth embroidered with Vaelor's child name. Beside it, a second name was being cut into the underside with a bone needle. Not spoken, written where only death would read. Queen Marianne stood in the doorway. Alive, furious, terrified. She had followed them. She had seen the purchase record before they silenced her. Leora's breath caught. She tried to warn him. The memory shifted. The queen reached for the burial cloth, but Merrick snapped the ledger shut. 2 council lords seized her arms. She spoke the same word Liora had just heard. Vaelor's death name. Not to curse him. To wake him. To make the grave reveal itself before it was finished. Merrick struck her across the mouth with the burial key. The memory shattered. Vaelor's chains tightened again, dragging him lower. His hand slammed against the obsidian step to keep from falling into the tomb mouth. Liora moved without thinking. "Do not," Merrick said. She stopped. Not because he commanded her. Because the tomb whispered warning beneath her feet. If she touched Vaelor now, the death name on her tongue might travel through skin. Merrick smiled. "You see? She cannot help him. The witness is a mouth with a locked grave behind it." Leora's hatred became cold. "You bought her silence because if Vaelor heard the name, the tomb would wake too early. I bought the kingdom time. You bought his body. I preserved his fire. For whom?" Merrick did not answer. The tomb did. The grooves beneath the court's feet lit gold. Each line ran from Vaelor's chains to noble galleries, council seats, and hidden bronze bowls beneath the floor where dragonfire had been collected in secret for years. The court had not only known, it had been warmed by him. A king can survive a murder. He cannot survive a grave that already knows his true name. Vaelor looked up at the nobles. "How long?" The tomb wrote for them. 12 years of funeral tithe. 12 years. Since the queen's death. Since Arven Veyne's execution. Since Liora became a traitor's daughter. The same bargain had buried all of them in different ways. Merrick lifted his staff. "The king lives because we managed what his grief would have burned." Vaelor's voice came low. "You managed my cage. A cage keeps dangerous things from destroying what they love." That landed. Liora saw it. Merrick had used Vaelor's fear of his own grief as another lock. Maybe Vaelor would have burned the court if he knew. Maybe he would have broken the kingdom for answers. That did not make the cage righteous. It only made the betrayal precise. The tomb spoke again through Queen Marianne's tired voice. "Witness may hold what king must not hear." Liora froze. The death name burned hotter behind her teeth. Vaelor understood at the same moment. No. The word was immediate. Not command. Refusal. Merrick laughed softly. "How touching." He will not let the servant carry his grave. But the tomb did not ask Merrick. It asked Liora. The witness mark at her feet opened like an eye. If she accepted, the death name would not pass into Vaelor yet. The tomb would pause. But the name would live inside her, a burial claim meant for a dragon king, burning behind a servant girl's mouth. Vaelor strained against the chains. "Do not someone else stand. Do not understand." Liora looked at him. "You did." The words cut him silent. Then softer, she said, "You threw me into a grave you did not understand." His eyes closed briefly. When he opened them, shame had entered the gold. "Yes." The tomb waited. Liora looked at Merrick with the stolen key, at the court warmed by Vaelor's fire, at the Dragon King fitted into a prison built from his own grief, and at the memory of her father's release seams, hidden under false funeral script. Then she opened her mouth. Not to speak the death name. To refuse its owner. "I will hold it," she said, "but not for the court." The tomb pulsed. "Not for the king." Vaelor's gaze locked on hers. "For the truth my father died trying to leave." The witness mark burned blue-white. The death name moved from the queen's memory into Leora's mark. Not through sound, but through stone. Pain struck her throat so sharply she nearly fell. Vaelor's chains stopped tightening. For one breath, the tomb held still. Then the witness mark changed. The open eye inside the grave door filled with Vaelor's death name. The runes climbed from the floor to Leora's collarbone, glowing beneath her skin like funeral script written on living breath. Merrick smiled. Too late. Liora understood. The tome had not freed Vaelor. It had tied his unfinished grave to her witness mark. The tomb wrote Vaelor's death name across Leora's skin, and the grave began closing around both of them. The grave closed around both of them because Liora had agreed to hold what had been written for Vaelor. Not his death. His claim. The difference mattered to the tomb, but not to the stone chains tightening around her throat. The funeral script burned beneath Leora's skin, climbing from her collarbone toward her jaw in thin blue-white lines. It did not choke her like rope. It made every breath feel borrowed from a room already sealed. Across the tomb steps, Vaelor's chains stopped dragging him downward, but they did not fall away. They stretched instead, each black link running from his body to hers, as if the grave had found a second wall to close against. The court stared down at them, a servant girl and a dragon king, bound by the same unfinished burial. Merrick's smile was quiet and vicious. Witnesses are so eager to be useful. Vaelor's gold eyes burned. Release her. The tomb pulsed once. Not command. Not king. Witness. Liora tasted stone on her tongue. She lifted one shaking hand before Vaelor could speak again. Do not command what I chose. His jaw tightened. The words hurt him. Good. They needed to. He had spent too long believing regret could stand beside authority and call itself restraint. Merrick stepped closer to the tomb's edge. She chose poorly. The grave accepted. Now the death name has a safer mouth. Liora turned toward him. Safe for whom? The staff in Merrick's hand cracked again. The key inside it glowed hot enough to cast his fingers in blue-white bone light. He did not answer. The tomb did. The funeral grooves beneath the noble galleries brightened, carrying Vaelor's stolen dragonfire upward through hidden channels. Bronze bowls opened under the floor like sleeping mouths, each one filled with a small gold flame. The nobles recoiled, but the flames had already remembered their houses. 12 years of funeral tithe. 12 years of stolen warmth. The court had not merely watched the Dragon King's cage being built. They had lived by its heat. Liora pressed one palm to the glowing script at her throat. What happens if the grave finishes closing? Merrick answered before the tomb could. The king becomes preserved. Vaelor's voice dropped. Alive. Stable. Merrick corrected. The grave rejected the word. Stable cracked across the nearest wall and broke into ash. Then new words carved themselves beneath it. Buried breath. Living fire. Endless rain without will. For the first time, several council lords looked truly afraid. Vaelor stared at the words. Then at Merrick. You were not preparing for my death. No, Merrick said. I was preventing the kingdom from losing its dragon. You were making me a furnace. A sovereign flame. Untouched by rage. Untouched by grief. Untouched by poor judgment. His eyes flicked toward Liora on the last word. Vaelor pulled against the chains. You mistake obedience for peace. And you mistake pain for wisdom. The tomb tightened around Leora's throat. She gasped. Vaelor surged forward, but the chain across his chest snapped him back. His dragon shadow burst open behind him and clawed at the air, but the shadow was weaker now, bleeding fire through every link connecting him to her. Liora understood with sudden, cold clarity. If Vaelor fought the tomb with dragonfire, the grave would drink him faster. If she held the death name too long, it would write him deeper through her. Merrick had trapped both choices. The grave had not finished because it lacked a witness. Now it had one. Liora looked down at the chains between them and noticed something the court had not. One link near Vaelor's wrist glowed differently. Not black. Not blue. White. Gold beneath the stone. Her father's release seam. Arven Veyne had hidden one even here. Not in the wall. In the chain. Her breath steadied. Merrick saw her focus shift. His eyes narrowed. Do not touch that. So she did. Liora gripped the glowing link with both hands. Pain flashed through her palms, bright enough to make her knees buckle. The death name in her throat burned harder, trying to force itself upward. She clenched her teeth and held it back. The link opened. Not broken. Opened. Inside it was a memory. Arven Veyne stood in the unfinished tomb, hands covered in black dust, carving the first chain. Beside him stood Queen Marianne, alive and pale from illness, one hand pressed to the stone as if listening to a heartbeat beneath it. If they take my son, the queen whispered. Can the grave be made to stop? Arven looked at the chain. Not by force. A grave that has been paid will always try to collect. Then how? By naming the buyer before the body is sealed. The queen closed her eyes. And if they kill you? Arven's voice broke. Then my bloodline must witness what I could not finish. The memory struck Liora harder than the pain. Her father had known. Not everything. Enough. He had not left her a weapon. He had left her a way to make death read the receipt correctly. The memory collapsed. Liora returned to the tomb with the glowing link burning in her hands. Vaelor stared at her. What did he leave? She swallowed the death name down until blood warmed her mouth. A grave that has been paid will try to collect, she said. Unless the buyer is named before the body is sealed. Merrick's staff flared. That is Mason superstition. The tomb rejected the words. Mason superstition burned across the wall, then split apart and reformed. Release law. The court recoiled. Vaelor looked at Merrick. Buyer. Merrick did not move. Liora did. She turned toward the noble galleries, toward the glowing bronze bowls under the court's feet, toward every lord warmed by stolen dragon fire. The buyer was not one man. The grave pulsed approval beneath her. Merrick's face went white. Liora lifted the open chain link. Name the houses that paid. The tomb answered with fire. One by one, the bronze bowls beneath the nobles ignited higher, each flame forming a house sigil above it. Dragon court lords stumbled back as their own crests rose in funeral light, names carved into the tomb walls, not as titles of honor, but as purchasers. House Voss, House Caerwyn, House Morthane, House Elver, House Draven's outer council. Vaelor's face hardened with each name. Merrick raised his staff. Enough! The key inside it burst free. The melted royal burial key shot from the cracked spine of the staff and embedded itself in the tomb floor between Liora and Vaelor. The grave mouth groaned open wider, and all the named house flames rushed toward the key at once. Merrick smiled through his fear. You wanted the buyer named, he said. Now the grave may collect from every buyer. The noble flames slammed into the burial key. The chains around Vaelor and Liora tightened violently. The grave began pulling both of them down. Liora fell to one knee. Vaelor reached for her despite the warning, despite the death name, despite the chains. This time, the tomb did not stop him. His hand closed around hers. The funeral script on Leora's skin blazed, and the grave wrote one final line between their joined hands. Two witnesses may name the debt. One must be buried to pay it. One must be buried to pay it. The words burned between Leora's hand and Vaelor's, bright enough to turn their joined fingers into bone-white silhouettes. The tomb did not roar. It did not threaten. It simply stated the rule written into its stones. The rule Merrick and the houses had trusted from the beginning. Debt needed a body. Royal grief needed a container. A purchased grave needed someone to close around. Vaelor's hand tightened around hers. Liora felt his decision before he spoke it. No, she said. His eyes lifted to hers. Gold fire breaking through pain. You do not know what I was going to say. I know kings when they decide their bodies are easier to spend than their guilt. The words struck him still. Around them, the grave pulled harder. The black chains dragged across the tomb floor, scraping sparks from obsidian. The burial key blazed between them, fed by the funeral flames of the named houses. Above the open grave, nobles screamed as their crests burned in the air, each one tied to the debt they had purchased and pretended was ceremony. Merrick stood at the edge, pale but smiling. Let him be noble, girl. That is what kings are for when their usefulness ends. Vaelor turned toward him. I am not ending for you, but you may end for her. Merrick's gaze flicked to their joined hands. That is the sweeter prison, is it not? Liora felt Vaelor flinch, not outwardly, but through the chain between them. Merrick knew exactly where to press. Vaelor's grief. His guilt, his fear that his fire could only destroy what he tried to protect. The tomb had been built from that fear. Liora squeezed his hand once. Do not give him a beautiful ending. Vaelor's jaw worked. What would you have me give? Truth. The grave pulsed under her knees. The word had weight. Liora turned toward the burning house crests. The tomb says one must be buried because the buyers wrote payment that way. Merrick's smile sharpened. The tomb completes the contract written into it. You said so yourself. Yes. Liora looked at the open chain link glowing near Vaelor's wrist. But my father hid release law inside the chain. Vaelor's eyes narrowed. Then the contract can be read again. Correctly, she said. The tomb warmed beneath her palm. Not approval. Permission. Liora forced herself to look at the line between their hands again. 2 witnesses may name the debt. 1 must be buried to pay it. She swallowed. Her throat still burned with Vaelor's death name. But behind the pain, another truth waited. Wording mattered. Graves obeyed exactness. Death had rules because courts had tried to make it useful. 1 what? She whispered. Vaelor heard. What? Liora leaned closer to the line, even as the pull dragged her lower. 1 must be buried. It does not say 1 witness. It does not say 1 king. It does not say 1 innocent body. Merrick's face changed. There. That was the crack. Liora lifted her voice. 1 debt. The tomb shuddered. Merrick snapped. No. Liora smiled through pain. Now he hears it. The grave floor split beneath the burial key. Inside the opening, layers of old contract stone appeared, each one written over the last. Queen's silence. Mason's bloodline. Living king. Funeral tithe. Preserved reign. Noble warmth. The debt was not a single act. It was an account, fed for 12 years by every house that had taken Vaelor's fire and called it stability. Vaelor's hand tightened again, this time not to sacrifice, to hold steady. How do we bury a debt? He asked. Liora looked toward Merrick's staff, cracked and hollow now without the key. By returning it to the office that carried it, Merrick stepped back. The tomb followed his movement with a line of blue-white fire. Liora turned fully toward him. Gravekeeper. The title struck the chamber like a bell. Merrick lifted his chin. I carried necessity. You carried receipt. The burning house crests bent toward him. He looked at the nobles then. And for the first time they looked back not as allies, but as men wondering if their keeper could save himself without naming them louder. Vaelor rose against the chains, dragging Liora up with him. Name the debt. Merrick's eyes cut to him. Commanding death again? No. Vaelor looked at Liora. Witnessing. The distinction passed through the tomb. The chains paused. Liora felt the grave listening. Together, she and Vaelor turned toward the burning receipt beneath the key. Liora spoke first. Received. 1 queen silence. Vaelor followed, voice low and rough. Paid. 1 Mason's bloodline. Leora's throat tightened around his death name, but she forced the next words out. Collateral. 1 living king. The tomb trembled. Vaelor looked at the galleries. Beneficiaries. Every house warmed by stolen dragonfire. The noble flames screamed higher. Merrick shouted, Do not answer. Too late. The grave had heard the structure of the debt. Liora lifted the open chain link. Office that carried the debt. Grave. Keeper. The burial key turned in the floor. Slowly. Once. Merrick's shadow stretched across the tombstones, dragged not by light but by account. He struck his staff against the floor, trying to summon old routes. But the staff was hollow now. The key had chosen the grave over his hand. Vaelor's chains loosened by 1 link. Leora's throat eased by 1 breath. Merrick's calm broke. If you bury the office, every royal death record for 12 years collapses. Every treaty signed after mourning fails. Every succession oath opens. You will unmake the court. Liora looked at him. No. The tomb waited. We will unedit it. The word moved through the chamber like a blade sliding free. Unedit. The funeral runes flared. The bronze bowls beneath the noble galleries cracked, spilling stolen gold flame across the floor. Instead of flowing back to Vaelor, the fire stopped before him, hovering in separate pieces, each pulse holding the warmth of a house bargain, a death record, a silence purchased and renamed law. Vaelor stared at the fragments of his own fire. Liora felt his temptation. No tunga. Huet. That fire belonged to him. It had been taken from him. Yet if he pulled it all back now, every record tied to it might collapse into him, making him the center of a debt he had not written but had inherited. Liora whispered. Do not swallow what they owe. Vaelor looked at her. The gold in his eyes steadied. I will not. The tomb accepted the answer. The stolen flames turned away from his chest and moved toward Merrick. The gravekeeper stumbled back. No, he breathed. The house crests bent lower. their flames folding into a single dark gold mass above him. Not a body. Not flesh. Debt. The one thing that could be buried. Merrick reached toward the council. Stop this. No one moved. The nobles had loved the gravekeeper while he made their guilt useful. They abandoned him the moment guilt took his shape. Liora almost pitied him. Almost. The debt descended. Merrick screamed as the dark gold mass wrapped around his staff arm. Then his chest. Then his throat. It did not kill him. The grave was not done reading. It pulled him toward the open contract stone beneath the burial key. Vaelor's chains snapped loose from one side. Leora's witness mark dimmed enough for her to breathe. Then the tomb spoke in Queen Marianne's tired voice. Debt may be buried, but the death name remains held. Liora went still. The funeral script under her skin flared again. Vaelor turned to her, horror sharpening his face. Merrick, half dragged toward the contract pit, smiled through pain. There, he rasped. Bury the dead if you like. The witness still carries the king's grave in her throat. The tomb pulled him another inch downward. Liora tried to speak, but Vaelor's death name burned behind her teeth. The grave had spared him from closing, but it had left her as the lock. Liora had not saved Vaelor from the grave. She had become the part of it that could still close. The death name burned behind her teeth like a coal that knew how to breathe. Every time she swallowed, funeral script flared along her collarbone. Every time Vaelor looked at her, the chains around him shifted, not tightening, not loosening, waiting for the name inside her to decide whether it belonged to him. Merrick laughed from the contract pit. The debt had wrapped around him in dark gold bands, pulling him down inch by inch. But pain had not stolen his satisfaction. A witness is only another kind of container, he rasped. Your father built release seams. I built mouths. Liora forced herself to breathe through her nose. If she opened her mouth too quickly, she feared the name would fall out. Vaelor took one step toward her. The tomb growled. Not at him. At the space between them. He stopped at once. Good. He was learning the difference between wanting to protect and being allowed to touch. His voice came low. What do I do? Liora almost closed her eyes. A king asking. Not commanding. Not assuming his pain made him entitled to hers. The question steadied her more than comfort would have. You do not make me your lock, she said. I would break the tomb first. No, she whispered. That is what Merrick wants. If you break it while the death name is in me, the grave will finish through my throat. Vaelor's face hardened. Merrick smiled wider. She understands. The tomb pulsed beneath them. The debt dragged Merrick lower. But the death name remained exactly where it was, burning under Leora's skin. The grave had buried the account, but kept the trigger. Which meant Merrick was not the only one who had written the lock. Liora looked down at the witness mark carved in light across her chest, an open eye inside a grave door. The eye had changed after she accepted the death name. Its pupil was no longer empty. It held a tiny black knot of script, too fine to read, folded into itself like a buried signature. Her father's release seam had opened debt. But not this. Someone wrote a keeper into the witness mark, she whispered. Vaelor's eyes sharpened. Who? The tomb answered before she could. Ask the first witness. The words formed not on the wall but around Leora's shadow. Her shadow stretched across the tomb floor, thin and trembling in the blue-white grave light. Then it split open like a door. Beneath it, another woman's outline appeared, kneeling where Liora stood now. Head bowed, throat marked with the same funeral script. Not Queen Marianne, not a servant Liora knew. Older, the first grave witness. The woman lifted her head inside the shadow. Her mouth had been sewn shut with gold thread. Leora's throat tightened in recognition that did not belong to her. The witness mark was not a gift. It was an office made from women who had survived being misnamed long enough to carry what courts feared to hear. The first witness raised one hand. The tomb translated her gesture in burning script. Witness marks were not born. They were purchased after the first royal death refused to stay edited. Merrick's laughter faded. Vaelor looked toward him. You knew. I inherited necessity, Merrick said. No, Liora forced out, the death name scorching her tongue. You inherited a gag. The first witness turned her sewn mouth toward Liora. Another line burned. A witness may hold a death name only until the writer of the lock is named. Leora's fingers dug into her palms. Not forever. There was a way. Vaelor saw it too. Name the writer. The tomb shuddered. The first witness lowered her hand toward Merrick. For one breath, Liora thought it would be simple. Then the shadow moved past him, past the contract pit, past the council galleries, toward the royal steps. The chamber went cold. Vaelor stopped breathing. The first witness pointed toward the Dragon King. No, not him. The tomb corrected the thought with brutal precision. Not the king, the blood that carried him. The funeral runes on the royal steps opened into a memory. A child Vaelor slept in a chamber lined with ember glass, no older than 8. Fever-bright and restless. Queen Marianne sat beside him, one hand on his hair. At the doorway stood the old Dragon King, Vaelor's father, King Oren Draven. Behind Oren waited Merrick, younger, patient, holding a strip of black burial cloth. Liora felt Vaelor's shock like heat through the tomb. My father, the memory answered. Oren looked at the sleeping boy and said, if grief wakes him before the court is ready, he will burn the realm. Marianne rose from the bedside. He is a child. He is a Dragon King in waiting. He is my son. Oren did not look at her. Then you should have taught him to survive without needing truth. Merrick unfolded the burial cloth. On it was the beginning of Vaelor's death name. Not completed yet. Waiting for a mother's silence, a mason's bloodline, and a witness mark to carry it if the grave awakened early. Liora understood. The lock had not been written after Queen Marianne died. It had begun while Vaelor was still a child. A king can survive a murder. He cannot survive a grave that already knows his true name. Vaelor's face had gone empty in the way of men who had been struck too deep to bleed. My father started it. Merrick pulled against the debt holding him, suddenly desperate. Your father understood succession. He understood danger. Vaelor turned toward him. He understood ownership. The tomb pulsed. Correct. The first witness pointed again at the memory. Oren pressed his ring into the burial cloth. Not the crown seal. A private blood seal. The lock was royal before it was Merrick's. Leora's witness mark burned open. The tiny black knot inside the eye unfolded into 2 signatures. Oren Draven blood author. Merrick Voss gravekeeper. The death name surged toward Leora's mouth. She clamped both hands over her lips, falling to one knee. Vaelor moved instinctively. The tomb snarled. He stopped, shaking with the effort. Liora, he said, voice rough. Do not hold it alone. She could not answer. If she opened her mouth, she might speak his burial into completion. The first witness lifted both hands. The gold thread over her mouth snapped one strand, then another. The tomb wrote beneath her shadow. A death name cannot be destroyed. It must be returned to the first hand that claimed it. Liora stared at Oren's memory. The old king was dead. His hand was ash. Merrick saw her realization and smiled again through the debt. A dead hand cannot receive. The tomb's blue-white light dimmed. Vaelor looked at his father's memory, then at the burning script on Leora's throat. My father's tomb, he said. The chamber stilled. Liora understood at the same time. King Oren had a grave. A sealed royal grave. A place where his hand, his seal, his death, and his claim could still be answered. The first witness nodded. Merrick's smile vanished. Vaelor lifted his head. Where? The tomb opened a narrow black stair beneath the royal steps. Not downward into Vaelor's unfinished grave. Sideways, toward the old king's crypt. The stair breathed dust and dead fire. Liora tried to stand, but the death name dragged at her throat. Vaelor reached toward the stair, then stopped and looked at her instead. This time, he did not ask the tomb. He asked her, Can you walk? Liora swallowed blood and stone. Then she nodded. The witness mark flared. The old king's crypt opened. And from within it, King Oren Draven's sealed grave answered with a knock from the inside. King Oren Draven's sealed grave knocked from the inside. Once, then again, then a third time, slow and patient. As if the dead king had been waiting years for someone to bring his unfinished crime home. The black stair beneath the royal steps opened wider, breathing dust, old fire, and the sour scent of sealed power. Liora stood at its mouth. with Vaelor's death name burning behind her teeth. Every breath scraped her throat. Every swallow dragged funeral script brighter across her collarbone. Vaelor stood beside her, close enough that she could feel his heat, far enough that the tomb did not snarl. He had learned distance. That should not have moved her. It did. Merrick struggled in the contract pit behind them, dark gold debt still dragging him down. "Do not go into the old king's crypt," he rasped. "Royal graves are sealed for a reason." Liora turned her head slightly. "Because they are holy?" Merrick's mouth twisted. The tomb answered instead. "Because some kings keep signing after death." The stare lit in blue-white lines. Vaelor's jaw tightened. "My father's grave still holds authority." "Your father's grave holds the first hand that claimed you," Liora said. The words came rough, almost breaking on the death name. Vaelor looked at her throat, at the witness mark glowing like an eye beneath her skin. His hands curled, then opened again. "What does it cost you to walk?" Liora almost smiled. "A bitter thing. Less than staying here." She stepped onto the stair. The old crypt accepted her weight. Not gently. The stone knew she carried a king's burial name. It tasted the script in her breath and pulled her forward like a lock recognizing the wrong key. Vaelor followed without touching her. Behind them, the unfinished tomb groaned, chains dragging across the floor as if warning that the path away did not mean freedom. The crypt corridor narrowed around them. Ancient dragon kings lined the walls in carved death masks, each face cut into black stone, each mouth sealed with gold ash. Their names had been hammered into plaques beneath them, but the letters blurred when Liora passed, as if the old dead did not want a grave witness reading too closely. Oren's grave stood at the end. It was not grand. That made it worse. A plain black sarcophagus. No dragonbone canopy, no mourning jewels, only a ring-shaped hollow carved into the lid, and one stone hand resting over the chest, fingers curled as if still holding a seal. The knocking came from beneath that hand. Vaelor stopped. For the first time since Liora had seen him, the Dragon King looked like a son before he looked like a king. "My father died 3 winters before my coronation," he said. "They told me his heart failed." The grave knocked again. Leora's throat burned. The dead rarely knock unless the story is wrong. Vaelor's eyes closed once, then opened. "Ask it." Liora shook her head. "No." His gaze found hers. "You ask it," she said. "This hand claimed you first." Pain moved through his face, but he nodded. Vaelor stepped to the sarcophagus and placed his palm over the carved stone hand. The crypt went black. Then Oren's grave opened its memory. King Oren stood alive in this same chamber, older than in the first memory. Sick but still sharp. Merrick knelt before him with the unfinished death cloth in both hands. "The queen resists," Merrick said. "The mason has hidden release seams." Oren coughed into a cloth dark with old blood. "Then buy both before they teach the boy to refuse. He is your son. He is a furnace with a crown waiting above it." Liora felt Vaelor flinch. Oren continued. "If he learns what grief can do before the court is fortified, he will burn us all. Better a preserved king than a ruined realm." Merrick bowed his head. "Then you authorize the living tomb?" Oren removed the blood ring from his hand and pressed it into the burial cloth. "I authorize the claim. You will manage the grave." The memory shuddered. Then Oren spoke the beginning of Vaelor's death name. Not all of it. Enough to start the lock. Liora fell to her knees. The death name behind her teeth answered like a beast hearing its first master. Vaelor turned toward her. "Liora, do not," she gasped. If he came closer, the name might leap from witness to body. Vaelor stopped, shaking. The memory continued. Oren looked toward the sealed chamber door. "If the name ever escapes containment, return it to my hand." Merrick hesitated. "Your Majesty, once you are dead, my grave will still carry my seal." The memory ended. The crypt returned. Liora was on the floor, one hand over her mouth, funeral light leaking between her fingers. Vaelor stood over his father's sarcophagus, face carved empty by betrayal. "He did not fear my death," he said. "He feared my will." The old grave knocked again. This time, the stone hand on the sarcophagus opened. Inside its palm lay not flesh, not bone, but a hollow shaped like a name. The tomb spoke through every sealed mouth in the crypt. Return the claim to the first hand. Liora tried to stand. Her knees failed. The death name dragged upward, not to be spoken to Vaelor, but to answer Oren's grave. Still, fear locked her jaw. If she released it wrong, the unfinished tomb could finish through the nearest living Draven. Vaelor understood. His voice softened. Tell me what to do. She hated how much that steadied her. Do not take it, she whispered. Do not hear it. Do not make it yours. What then? Stand as witness, not heir. Vaelor stepped back from the sarcophagus. The old grave shuddered, offended. Good. Liora crawled closer to Oren's stone hand. The witness mark on her chest opened like an eye. Pain split through her throat as the death name rose without sound, blue-white script leaving her skin in thin burning strands. The name did not pass through her mouth. It passed through the mark. Letter by letter, the burial claim unwrote itself from her collarbone and flowed into Oren's hollow palm. The old grave began to close around the name. Then it stopped. A new line appeared across the sarcophagus lid. First hand receives. Living blood must renounce inheritance. Vaelor went still. Liora's voice was raw. It wants you to give up the claim your father left you. My throne. No. She looked toward the old king's hand. The right to own what was done in your name without answering for it. Silence filled the crypt. Then Vaelor drew the blood ring from Oren's grave hollow. It burned his fingers, but he did not drop it. I renounce inherited silence, he said. The crypt shook. I renounce my father's claim over my death. The old death masks cracked. I renounce every grave made lawful by Draven blood if the body inside did not consent to be named. The blood ring shattered in his hand. The death name vanished into Oren's stone palm. Liora collapsed forward, finally able to breathe without stone in her throat. Vaelor caught himself before catching her. He stopped with his hand inches from her shoulder. May I? The question broke something tired inside her. Yes. He helped her rise carefully, as if touch had become a vow he did not get to assume. Behind them, Oren's grave sealed shut. Then knocked one final time. Not from within, from below. The crypt floor split open, revealing rows of smaller name hollows beneath the old king's tomb. Not one death name. Dozens. Liora stared down into the dark. Merrick had not built Vaelor's cage alone. Oren had practiced on others first, and the first hollow beneath the king's grave carried her father's name. The first hollow beneath King Oren's grave carried her father's name. Dragon Veyne. Liora did not need the letters spoken. The moment the name opened under the sarcophagus, grief struck the old place inside her that had never been allowed to heal. Below Oren's sealed tomb, the floor had split into rows of smaller name hollows, each shaped like a place where a death name had once been stored, tested, or erased. Some were empty. Some glowed faintly with blue-white ash. Some still held scraps of breath, caught like moth wings under stone. Vaelor stared into the dark. These are not royal names, the grave answered. Practice claims. Leora's throat tightened. Her father had not only been payment, he had been practice. A hollow near Arvin's name opened wider. A memory rose inside it. Her father kneeling in a half-built burial chamber, hands bound behind him. Merrick standing above him with the half-melted burial key. King Oren was not present. He did not need to be. His blood ring lay on a black cushion beside the contract stone, giving permission without breathing. Merrick spoke into the memory. If the Mason's bloodline can hold refusal, then his name can hold a trial claim. Arvin lifted his head. He looked younger than Liora remembered. Frightened, but not broken. My daughter is not yours. Merrick smiled. Not yet. Liora flinched. Vaelor's hand steadied her with permission, not possession. The memory shifted. Arvin's name was pressed into the hollow under Oren's grave. Not to bury him, but to test whether a living claim could be stored beneath a royal death without waking the main tomb. The stone rejected part of him. Enough. That was why they executed him publicly afterward. Not because they were done with him, because the grave had learned from him. Leora's hands shook. They used my father to teach the tomb how to hold you. Vaelor's voice was raw. And kept you alive in case the lesson needed a witness. The crypt walls pulsed. Correct. Dozens of name hollows flared around them. Servants, grave masons, mourning scribes, lower archive keepers, people the court could misname without shaking noble tables. Each one had helped the living tomb become more precise. Liora stepped toward the hollows. Can they be released? The first grave witness's shadow appeared along the crypt wall, sewn mouth split by broken gold thread. She lifted one hand. The tomb translated, "Only the final claim can unmake the practice claims." Vaelor looked toward the stair leading back to the unfinished tomb. "Mine." Liora turned sharply. "No." He met her gaze. "Not my burial. My claim." The difference mattered. Still, fear moved through her. Vaelor looked at Arven's name. "If Orin built every smaller grave to prepare mine, then mine is the keystone. If we undo it correctly, the others may open." "Correctly," Liora repeated. "Not by dying in it." "No." His answer came fast. "Good." A deep groan shook the crypt. Merrick's voice came down through the stair, thin and sharp. "Bring the witness back, or I will let the house flames decide which body pays." Leora's blood chilled. Vaelor's jaw tightened. "He can still move the debt?" "He still holds the office," she said. "And the buyers are still above." The crypt answered. "Buyers unburied. Debt unsettled." Liora looked at Arven's hollow one last time. Then a whisper rose from it. "Do not trade him for me." Liora froze. "Father?" The hollow dimmed, then glowed again. "Witness the buyer, not the body." The words sank into her like a final inheritance. She turned to Vaelor. "We do not close your grave around you." "No." "We do not close it around me." "No." "We make the buyers stand inside the sentence they purchased." Vaelor's gold eyes burned steady. "How?" "The receipt named beneficiaries," Liora said. "The tomb has their house flames. Merrick thought that made them power." The first grave witness raised both hands. Liora understood. "It makes them signatures." The crypt trembled. They climbed the black stair back toward the dragon hall. This time, they moved together, not chained, not touching, but bound by the same direction. The closer they came to the main tomb, the hotter the funeral air became. When they emerged, the chamber had changed. Merrick was no longer half buried in the contract pit. He had dragged himself out to his waist, dark gold debt wrapped around him like armor. The noble house flames circled the burial key like starving birds. Every lord in the gallery looked pale, but not innocent. Merrick smiled. Did the old king absolve his son? Vaelor answered before Liora could. "No." The court shifted. "Good. Let them hear that." Liora stepped to the edge of the tomb. The witness mark on her collarbone no longer held Vaelor's death name, but it still glowed with the open eye inside the grave door. "The old king kept practice claims beneath his own grave," she said. "Servants, masons, scribes, witnesses, my father among them," Merrick snapped. "Dead criminals." The tomb rejected the phrase. Dead criminals cracked apart above him and reformed. Misnamed material. The nobles recoiled. Vaelor descended one step into the unfinished tomb. The chains stirred at his approach, remembering him, wanting him, but also remembering the release law now. Liora lifted her voice. "The final claim can unmake the practice claims." Merrick's smile returned. "Then the king must enter." "No," Liora said. "The claim must." She pointed toward the burning house flames. Every buyer signed through fire. The tomb pulsed. The noble flames twisted. Liora continued, stronger now. House Voss, House Kerwin, House Morthane, House Elver, the Outer Council, every house that purchased warmth from a living king's grave. The flames bent toward the contract stone, not toward Vaelor, toward the debt. Merrick's face changed. "No." Vaelor looked across the court. "Step forward." No one moved. The tomb answered their silence. The floor beneath each named lord opened into a narrow grave-shaped line. Not deep. Deep enough. Leora's father's hollow glowed from below, along with all the others. The practice claims were rising. The court had buried names beneath kings. Now the buried names were calling the buyers down. Merrick lifted the stolen staff, broken and keyless. "Close the tomb." The house flames surged. The grave mouth began to close. Not around Vaelor. Not around Liora. Around every signature still refusing to stand in its own debt. Then Queen Marianne's voice rose through the chamber. Final witness required. Liora went still. The tomb wrote one last line across the floor. The grave witness must name the living buyer who still hides unnamed. Merrick smiled again. Too slowly. Too confidently. Liora looked around the court. All named houses burned. All visible buyers shook. But one flame did not rise from the galleries. It rose from beneath Vaelor's throne. The Dragon King turned. Beneath his own seat, a hidden buyer's flame opened like a golden eye, and inside it burned the royal mark of House Draven. The hidden buyer's flame did not rise from the court. It rose from beneath Vaelor's throne. For one breath, the Dragon Hall forgot Merrick. Forgot the open grave. Forgot even the stone chains waiting around the Dragon King's body. Every eye turned toward the throne carved from black dragon bone, where a golden flame burned beneath the seat like an eye that had been open for 12 years. Inside it glowed the royal mark of House Draven. Vaelor stared at it. Liora felt the silence around him harden. No shock. Recognition arriving too late. Merrick laughed softly from the contract pit, dark gold debt wrapped around him like armor. There is your final buyer, your majesty. The court purchased warmth. The council purchased stability. But House Draven purchased continuity. Vaelor's voice was low. My father. No, Liora said. The tomb pulsed beneath her feet. Not no. Not only. She stepped closer to the throne flame. The witness mark on her collarbone opened again. Blue-white light spreading like an eye through funeral script. The hidden flame bent toward her, and inside it she felt layers. King Orin's blood ring, Merrick's office, noble house signatures, and something still living. Not Vaelor's will, his inherited right. House Draven had not simply been used. House Draven had agreed to benefit. Liora turned toward him. It is not asking whether you signed it. His jaw tightened. It is asking whether you will keep what it bought. The words cut deeper than accusation. Good. The grave did not need another innocent king. It needed an answerable one. Vaelor looked from the hidden flame to the open tomb, to the house crests burning above the guilty lords, to Merrick half buried in the debt he had carried, to Liora standing with her father's name still glowing from the practice hollows below. My throne was warmed by it, he said. The tomb stilled. Listening. My reign stood over it. The throne flame brightened. I did not write the first claim, Vaelor continued, voice roughening. But I inherited its heat, and called it mine because no one forced me to ask what fed it. Merrick's smile faltered. Careful, he said. A king who disowns his house disowns his crown. Vaelor looked at him. Then let the crown answer before the grave does. He descended fully into the unfinished tomb. The chains rose at once. Liora moved, fear striking through her. Vaelor. He lifted one hand, not to stop her, but to ask for one moment. Not command. Request. She gave it. Barely. The chains wrapped around his wrists, his chest, his throat. This time, he did not fight them with dragonfire. He let them measure him while the hidden flame beneath the throne burned hotter and hotter, dragged forward by the tomb's demand. The grave wrote across the floor. Final buyer. House Draven. Living holder. Vaelor Draven. Debt status. Unanswered. Merrick's voice sharpened. Answer it wrong. And the tomb closes. Vaelor's eyes stayed on Liora. What does it need? She looked down at the contract lines. At the word buyer. At the flame under his throne. At the house crests bending toward the grave. Not your body, she said. The tomb warmed. Not your death. The chains loosened by one link. Leora's voice strengthened. It needs you to return what House Draven accepted. Vaelor understood. His face changed. Not with relief. With grief. The stolen dragonfire inside the hidden throne flame was not only power, it was years, comfort, victories, treaty warmth, noble loyalty, the invisible fuel of his reign. Returning it meant more than punishing Merrick. It meant breaking the lie that had kept his throne stable. Vaelor looked up at the court. Every title granted by funeral tithe is suspended. The noble galleries erupted. He spoke over them. Every treaty warmed by stolen dragonfire will be reviewed before witnesses. The tomb pulsed. Every death record edited by grave keeper law will be opened. The house flames screamed. Merrick struggled against the debt. You will collapse your own kingdom. Vaelor's voice turned cold. No. I will stop letting a cage call itself a kingdom. The hidden buyer's flame tore free from beneath the throne and descended into the tomb. It hovered between Vaelor and Liora. Gold, black, old. The final Draven claim. The grave waited for a body. Liora stepped forward. No. Vaelor's gaze snapped to her. I was not going to give it one. Good, she said. Then prove it. Together they looked at the contract stone. Liora lifted her witness-marked hand. Final buyer named. Vaelor placed his chained hand beside hers. Final holder answering. The tomb trembled. Liora spoke first. House Draven does not get to pay with a servant. Vaelor followed. House Draven does not get to pay with a king. The buried practice hollows flared beneath the floor. Arven Veyne's name shone brightest. Liora swallowed hard. Then finished. The debt returns to the signatures that benefited. Vaelor's gold eyes burned. And to the office that kept the account. The hidden buyer flame split. Part of it rushed toward the named house crests, binding each lord to the narrow grave lines beneath his feet. Part of it struck Merrick, tearing the dark gold debt from his body and forcing it down into the contract pit. The rest flowed into the practice hollows beneath Orin's grave. Not to bury the victims again, but to unlock them. The tomb roared. Note in Hunga. In release. Blue-white light burst through every false funeral rune. The names beneath the old king's grave rose into the dragon hall. Masons, scribes, servants, witnesses, misnamed dead. Arven Veyne's name came last, steady and bright. Liora nearly fell. Vaelor caught her only after she reached for him. That mattered. Across the chamber, Merrick was dragged to his knees before the open contract pit. His staff lay broken beside him, empty of key, empty of office. The grave wrote his title one final time. Gravekeeper who edited death, buyer of silence, keeper of the living tomb. The stone did not swallow him, it marked him. That was worse. The house lords sank only to their knees inside the shallow grave lines, trapped before the names they had purchased warmth from. Not dead. Not absolved. Held for witness. Queen Marianne's voice rose through the tomb. Tired but clear. Now name the falsely named. Liora turned to her father's name. Her throat closed. For 12 years, Arven Veyne had been traitor, poisoner, graveseller. A convenient body for a purchased silence. Liora placed her palm over his name. Arven Veyne, she said. Royal grave, mason, builder of release seams, refuser of the living tomb, falsely named traitor. The tomb answered. Received. The traitor mark that had followed Liora all her life cracked across her wrist and fell away like old ash. She was not crowned, not made queen, not claimed. She stood in the royal grave with a witness mark on her skin, and a dead father's name finally clean. Vaelor stepped beside her, chains falling loose from his body one by one. I threw you into a grave to force an answer, he said before the whole court. I will answer for that. Liora looked at him. No forgiveness came easily. Good. Easy forgiveness belonged to courts, not wounds. You will, she said. He bowed his head. Before you. Before the opened records. Before every falsely named grave. The tomb did not forgive him. It listened. That was enough for now. The unfinished grave stopped closing. Its walls opened instead, not into darkness, but into rows of names waiting to be restored. The dragonfire stolen from Vaelor did not rush back into him all at once. It hovered in separate flames, each tied to a record, a witness, a house, a debt that would have to be answered correctly before power could return. Liora understood. So did Vaelor. No throne could be healed faster than the graves beneath it. At dawn, the Dragon Hall doors opened. Cold light spilled across obsidian, broken staffs, fallen chains, and nobles kneeling inside their own purchased lines. Liora stood at the tomb's edge. No longer Traitor's daughter. No longer offering. No longer the court's convenient body. She was Liora Veyne, grave witness. The girl death refused until the truth was named. And behind her, the royal grave did not close. It remembered.